Hi everyone, I'm Liv,
I'm Claire.
I'm Tracy.
and today we will be talking about the current impacts of hallucinogens among Indigenous South Americans. In this presentation, we will go over the different uses of hallucinogens in Indigenous South American cultures, as well as the impacts facing these tribes and hallucinogens regarding mental health, the growing industry, as well as governmental restrictions and solutions to each of these issues. And lastly, our concluding thoughts.
Some uses of hallucinogens include religious and spiritual reasons. Hallucinogens are taken as a sacrament during rituals or rites of practices to unite a tribe. Um, they're also used in warfare in order to induce hallucinations during a battle. And there's also medicinal and healing purposes for hallucinogens.
So, the negative impacts of the hallucinogenic industry on Indigenous communities stem from various causes. Global interest has increased demand of hallucinogens with the rise of popularity in non Western ways of healing, self exploration, and spiritual growth. The second is the lack of legal frameworks and regulations. There's a clear lack of this legal framework, and it creates challenges to ensuring ethical practices, protection of Indigenous rights, and the promoting of sustainable sourcing. Third, we have capitalism and profit-driven intent. This industry is motivated by profit as it's a billion-dollar industry, and it has resulted in companies prioritizing capital gain rather than equitable benefits distributed to Indigenous communities. The fourth is a lack of cultural awareness. Many consumers are unaware of the cultural significance and the traditional uses of hallucinogenic substances within Indigenous communities, and this lack of awareness can lead to a disregard for sacred practices, cultural protocols, and the importance of involving Indigenous communities within this industry. And last, we have unsustainable practices. This increase in demand for hallucinogens and profit motivated business models has resulted in unsustainable harvesting practices and that have negatively impacted the ecosystems and traditional territories of Indigenous communities.
So, our first impact facing South American tribes is regarding mental health. Hallucinogens can be a temporary solution for depression, PTSD, anxiety, as well as others. Due to this, hallucinogenic tourism is becoming more popular, which is leading to a bigger population getting temporary access to hallucinogens that are native to South America. People will travel to South America to take different hallucinogens just as a tourism aspect, completely disrespecting the cultural aspects and traditions of these hallucinogens. And they're doing this because 2 out of 3 people report improvement in after taking ayahuasca specifically, but as well as other drugs or hallucinogens. People report feeling less anxious, angry, and upset, and more easygoing, safer, and better. And so hallucinogenic tourism is becoming more popular because of this.
So some impacts facing South American tribes within this industry. We have exploitation of cultural knowledge and sacred practices. Peru and Costa Rica have become some of the most popular destinations for ayahuasca tourism, where people are coming all over the world to partake in these ceremonies. Specifically in the Shar community, they allow tourists to partake in sacred rites of passage ceremonies, and researchers and anthropologists have noted a lack of cultural understanding among tourists and the drastic changes in the Shar's social structure relating to wealth and social standings. Um, Many of the ayahuasca retreats actually do not involve Indigenous peoples or traditional shamans. Many retreats are run by Westerners who study shamanic traditions, and there are online classes and certification programs allowing anyone to become shamans without experiencing life in Indigenous South American communities. The commodification of Indigenous culture exploits traditional knowledge by lack of proper acknowledgement, compensation, or involvement of Indigenous communities. So another impact, we have a lack of equitable benefits. Indigenous communities face economic marginalization and lack access to benefits that have been produced by this industry. As it is a multi-billion-dollar industry and continues to grow, it diminishes the sacred nature of traditions not intended for profit. And this industry furthers the inequalities and the marginalization of Indigenous communities. And last, we have impacts of the environment. Sacred to Indigenous communities is the environment, and overharvesting of plants with hallucinogenic properties has resulted in habitat destruction, harmful agricultural methods, and that those impact Indigenous communities' lifeways and their emphasis of environmental stewardship.
The final impact we'll be discussing that faces South American tribes is governmental restrictions. Tribes such as the Nawa and the Yana Nawa have worked with religious movements such as the UDV in order to petition the Brazilian government for more protections and rights regarding the use of ayahuasca, as it's currently only protected as to be ingested as a sacrament. Their access to the lands, the actual plants itself, are coming under fire as growing industries develop.
So as far as the current state goes for mental health, the impact of modern Western medicine and the popular hallucinogenic tourism, like I mentioned earlier, is leading to the acculturation of South American tribes, including loss of their native language and displacement of their traditional health systems.
Within the industry, the current state is that despite hallucinogens being traditionally non-Western, Western medical practitioners and researchers are leading in the industry.
And the current state of governmental restrictions is that it is currently legal for Indigenous groups in South America to use psychedelics in ritual use, but the growing pressure from Western countries with increased use threatens their way of life.
Some solutions we have are international sanctions that protect Indigenous groups and their ritual use of psychedelics, continued research into the global benefits of psychedelic use with a priority of keeping Indigenous groups involved in this process. And another solution would be to decolonize the hallucinogenic industry by emphasizing Indigenous rights, benefit sharing agreements, and cultural education and environmental stewardship.
Lastly, for our concluding thoughts, first, as more people become involved in the tradition and practice of psychedelics, it's important to keep Indigenous groups at the forefront of this process. Mental health factors should also be considered in any governmental restrictive decisions, as it is an important factor that needs to be prioritized. And lastly, it's important to emphasize agency of Indigenous communities and recognize the traditional knowledge that has been cultivated for thousands of years. Thanks for watching.